we accepted to to participate in this tournament. I really didn't have the familiarity with the theme of the conference. I just have known Frank for God since he was a baby, and you know, coaching at Miami High, you know, with a whistle, and I got a lot of respect for him, and got a lot of respect for the program by being from that general area. But as time moved on, and it was brought to my attention the emphasis placed on this tournament, I became more and more excited. I'm hoping that that there's something that we can do or say that will help move the needle in terms of the climate that we're dealing with now in America. We have a tendency to all have personal opinions about issues, and I've never been one to want to say exactly how I personally feel on Pacific issues. However, I do believe that there needs to be conversation. There needs to be a clear understanding of the history of these types of issues, and look around the world and see how see the negative effects of people not being able to get along with one another and allowing our selfish motives to overtake good sound judgment and reasoning. That's why I always encourage dialogue, communication, understanding, patience. Always go by the rule that I learned as a kid at Mount Zion Baptist Church in Gastonia, North Carolina, on the corner of Morrison and Allison, where everybody's somebody and Christ is all. I always don't learn how to just treat everybody right, do unto others as I would have them do unto you. I think we, as it relates to racism, it's hard to believe that we kind of get ourselves in a frame of mind where we dislike or disrespect one another without even actually knowing each other. I mean, how can I form an opinion about you when I don't really know you? But this is not something new. Society all over the world, when you look back at the history of a lot of different countries, we've had these types of conflicts. And when you really, really do your research, you'll find that none of it really turns out very well. So I'm glad to participate. I don't want to be someone to instigate or motivate or bring a negative light. I'm not trying to make anyone feel some kind of way about who they are and what they should and should not be doing. I want to encourage people to have dialogue, communication, and have a clear understanding there's enough of this good life that we have in America for all of us. We can share the water, we can share the air, we can share the sunshine, and we should be able to share relationships. Now I'll turn it over to Frank. I know he got plenty to say.
Just like Coach Ham just said, the original thought when this was put in front of me was the great people of Rock Hill that have built this facility, a facility that's opening the doors up for so many young people in our state, to then be able to bring the state school in there to play. And I remember telling the people, the folks that organized everything, I said, I want to play. If you want me to play, I need to play a good opponent. And then they called me and said, Florida State. I said, are you kidding me? They're probably the best ACC team in the last 4 or 5 years. And like Coach Ham said, by the way, there's not a coach in America that gets less credit for the person that he is in Leonard Hamilton. The amount of people that he has helped, white, black, Hispanic, it makes no difference. To open doors to help them grow as human beings. I'm a living example. I mean, I was a 22, 23-year-old high school assistant coach that knew nothing about nothing. And he let me into his office and showed me what it's like to be in a college basketball office. No one else ever did that for me. And you know, and I've learned. So now then we're part of the event, and Ham told me, and Stan Jones, his assistant, who's a dear friend, and Charlton Young, the reason I'm in college basketball right now. Charlton CY is who opened the door for me by getting his former boss at Northeastern to hire me. Once we spoke and we agreed to play, I also found out the purpose of putting the event together and the Friendship Nine, and obviously being in the state, I understand the history a little bit. But what's funny is growing up as a Cuban kid in Miami, I didn't understand a lot of these challenges that this country had in its history. And without him knowing, and it's not like he was running around talking, you just heard him negatively about his experiences as a man growing up. On the contrary, he spoke about the challenges that he had growing up, but the love that he had for everything in front of him. I learned a lot about the history of what happened back in the day from Coach Ham. I mean, he lived it. He felt it. He saw it. And he was willing to share some of that with me, unbeknownst that in 2021, now, you know, I'm going to live in the pocket of the world where he grew up in, and we're playing in this event for such a great cause. And just like Coach Ham said, I'm a true believer that anytime you work to make progress, the second you stop working, you go back further than where you started at. And it's so important that you continue to make progress, to grow away from the challenges that make people's lives complicated. And the fact, just like he articulated, that we get to share all the resources that allows us to live life. How can we then not appreciate and respect each other's space, and until we get to know one another? But it's going to be a great event. I can't thank Coach Ham enough for agreeing to come up to bring Florida State into South Carolina and to play and you know in a great event that's for such a great cause. And I'm super excited. And again, I hope that all you folks that are covering this event, I hope you guys give Coach Ham the credit that he deserves, because you hear, another friend of mine, Bob Huggins, everyone's talking about he should be in the Hall of Fame. Leonard Hamilton deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And what he does for this sport, for people, there's a guy that I've become friends with that I saw him save his life, period. Kevin Norris. It's and like that, there's numerous stories. So it's going to be an honor to take the court next to Coach Ham, and it's not going to be fun for me from a coaching perspective, but I know my team will be a lot better after the game because of the kind of basketball that his teams play.
Start with questions. We're going to go to Lane Hurt from Seminoles.com first. I think you muted, Lane?
Let's see. Hold on. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Coach Hamilton, when you see this and you have different programs and different coaches from different backgrounds uniting in a cause like this, how much more powerful does it make it, and how does it help bring growth?
Well, I think that I don't want you to miss a point that Frank articulated. Being of Cuban descent, when you think about the challenges that his ancestors and his relatives had to overcome to be a part of taking it, this unique, special country that we live in. I mean, they even had to just find a way to escape the challenges of being in Cuba and trying to get out desperately to try to have a better way of life. I went through segregation. I drank at the colored water fountain. I used the colored bathroom. And I had to sit in the back of the bus. And I can go on and on about the challenges that I had to overcome. But you can see Frank's not bitter. He's not saying anything negative about the experiences he had in Cuba. And I don't hold any animosity toward anyone that had a part of the lack of things that was afforded me during my era. It motivated both of us to try to overcome and create opportunities for each other and our family because of the opportunity that exists to us in America. And I think I want to be able to share that with any and everybody who deserves it and who earns it. But in life, as we are raised and as we are educated, we need to do research, not only on what has happened to other countries who found themselves in these types of situations. We need to do research on how we got to this point, and we need to figure out how we can improve and get away from this stagnant position that we in while we so angry and disrespectful and rude and uncaring for each other. I don't think that any of us in our society are born with hatred in our heart. I can't imagine an infant coming out of the womb of his parents saying, I dislike this person because he looks like this, and I dislike that person because he looked like this, and I don't want to share this because of this. We're not born that way. But society, all the things that are going on in our society has separated us, has divided us, where we live, how we educate, how we get paid, what opportunities that we have, and it's, instead of growing closer together, I find that we're in a place where it's obviously that we're not in a good place. My thought is this: how can we put somebody on the moon and we can't figure out how to get along? That just doesn't add itself up. It doesn't make very much sense that we can do so many great things in medicine, in education, in science, and all the different areas where we excel in America. And one of the most basic things in life, we can't figure out how to share and get along with one another, and that we're having to have this conversation about 2001. So, my point is that when everyone starts trying to have opinions about the woulda, coulda, shoulda, without the research that goes along to try to evaluate how we got to this point, look in detail as to the history of this situation, and then come together with a organized, total, thorough, evaluated approach to how we're going to deal with these issues of our society, as opposed to becoming more selfish, more territorial, more antagonistic and selfish. We got to find, but you can't do that unless we respect each other and the powers to be decide that's important. In other words, you guys can write articles. I can voice my opinion. Frank can evaluate it and voice his opinion. But only thing I'm going to end up doing is offending some and making some happen. So my opinion on specific things and people doesn't really move the needle. So what we have to do is come to all these intelligent minds that we have in America, that we have to come together and come up with an approach that's researched, that's documented, that we all believe to be true. In other words, you can't get to a place if you don't first understand where you are. In other words, it'd be nice to have a GPS machine to say, okay, but that doesn't exist. So you grow up in one environment. You have been taught, you've been experienced, you've had certain experiences that has shaped to be who you are. You can't help that. Conversation at the dinner table. You didn't ask, but that's the information that's going into your mind. So now once you get to be a teenager and a young adult, you're who you are as a result of your experiences. Now, I think that when I emphasize research and information, then we don't have anything in our educational systems that talk about conflict resolution. We don't have anything in our educational system that talk about giving and sharing. In our society, we have 50% of all marriages ending in divorce. Come on now. In other words, an institution of marriage in America, one of the most important things that we deal with in life is developing a relationship, getting to know someone, start becoming affectionate, raise a family, have kids, have jobs, buy houses, have responsibilities, and then 5 or 6 years after that, you feel like you can't get along. Because we're not taught, we don't have any part of our society that has educated us and prepared us for conflict resolution. How do I respect someone? How do I get along with someone from the opposite sex? Now, all you guys are educated, I'm assuming, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We can do that pretty well. But how can we be intelligent enough to learn how to read, write, do arithmetic, and we can't figure out how to get along? Now, I'm not blaming our educational system because but when you have the diet-related illnesses that we have, when you have the obesity that we have in school systems, and most of the issues, the health issues that we have, are as a result of our diet and what we eat and how we prepare our food. So, and we keep perpetuating it. In other words, a lot of the cancers that we deal with, this dreaded disease, is as a result of self-inflicted. All of us not die, all of us not inherited. But we don't have any challenges in our education system. Yeah, we have a health course, and they'll say that, you eat an orange, you get vitamin C. You get vitamin D from sunlight, and you drink milk and you get vitamin D. But in reality, we don't train our kids the importance of what we eat and how we take care of ourselves and the effect it's going to have on us in the future. So in terms of the drug epidemic, the diet-related illnesses, the gun violence, the gang wars, the drug overdoses, those things that are plaguing our society, we don't address them at an early enough age. So you throw in interpersonal relationships, how to relate to each other. That's not part of our educational system either. So if we not train each other how to get along with 50% of divorces, and we're having diet-related illnesses, and we're having drug overdoses, the gang violence, the gun violence, then our whole being need to be evaluated by the people who make the decisions. I mean, when I listen to politicians, I'm thinking, when are we going to deal with the issues that we really fighting in our society? We don't talk about that. We keep talking about taxes, and we talk about the economy, and we're dying all over the place. We're self-inflicting ourselves. So my point to you, not only do we need to have a think tank about how we deal with racism, we have a lot of issues that we need to address. And we just sitting here, it's almost like, we complaining about everything, but what are we doing? I'm glad to participate, but I realize that Frank and I we'll bring some attention, and we'll write about it in 3 or 4 days. Y'all have moved on to something else. So what are we going to do? What are you going to do as people with the pen who have the voice on the radio and television? What are y'all going to do about addressing this? Are you just going to write about this for 3 or 4 days and the game's over, then y'all going to move on to something else? Then you either part of the solution or part of the problem. My concern is I got to be careful not to be specific about my opinion about certain things. I want to look at the big picture. We need to come together. We need to have conversation. We need to have a serious approach to how we're going to deal with this. We need to identify not only racism, all the other issues that we have in our society. And it's always been my belief, it's not going to be important to the society until it becomes important to somebody who is important. Now, Frank and I, we might be important in our immediate communities, but how important I'm going to be to somebody in Oregon or Washington or California, I don't know. So then that throws it back into where are the most important people? Who are they? And we got to be careful about how you point things out, because you play yourself into that position of opinions who doesn't mean anything. Let's do our research. Let's have a plan, a organized, total, thorough, evaluated research plan. Not only how we're going to deal with the racism issue, but how we're going to deal with all the other issues that probably plaguing us that needs the same level of attention. And just like we're neglecting the serious, organized, total plan in racism, we doing the same thing. And the only place, Frank, that I see where we have a group of people that we can talk to and communicate is in our educational systems. But now we're confused as to how we should teach, what we should teach in our education system. So we got to find a way to generate that focus, start from scratch, but it's got to be important to somebody like the people with the pen in order for it to be important, in order for it to get the attention that it needs. And I know I've said a lot. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut and move on and turn it back over to Frank.
Let's go to David Cloninger if we could.
Leonard, Frank, thank you guys for doing this this morning, taking the time. Did want to ask you, during the event, before, after, halftime of the game, are you guys going to approach the crowd and say something on these topics? Is that going to be part of the agenda during this event?
Yeah, I'm just showing up. I'm coachable. I'm gonna do whatever they tell me. Okay, but my point to you is me standing in front of 2,000 or 3,000 people and talking. I'm not real sure that's the approach. You know what would be great if you guys, we got off this call and all you guys got together and say, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna say? Can we all get on the same page? Can we be a group of people who every time we get a chance, we bring this to the attention of the powers to be? I mean, because I'm gonna say this and people gonna leave. Well, some people gonna like what I say, some people gonna dislike what I say. What I'm saying to you you guys either be part of the problem or part of the solution. Then you guys will write what I say. That's my opinion, and y'all are high. Y'all might believe exactly what I'm saying, but in order for you to be able to write it, you gotta associate it with me, and that's where the problem starts. We do not have people who are committed, and I can bring some attention. It's more important that I talk to you guys than talk to people in the stand. They come to see a basketball game, but it's more important that you guys be a part of coming together. What are we gonna do? If Frank and I can't encourage you guys to get in the fight, then then it's just as difficult to get other folks in other way of life to get in the fight. I mean, you wind me up, push me out there, I'll be okay. But I'm not real sure that's what's happening. Frank will have his opinion in Columbia, and I'll have mine in Tallahassee. But what needle is that gonna move?
And Dave, to kind of piggyback on what Leonard is explaining, I've lived in the state for 10 years. If it's not because of this event, I never find out about the Friendship Nine. I don't find out about the impact that those guys, those 8 basketball players, 8 of the 9 guys, that all 9, but 8 of them basketball players, the impact they made in that community, the stance that they took to do what's right, to bring attention. I've been here 10 years. I didn't know about it. I hadn't read about it. And so that's kind of piggybacking on, what Leonard's talking about. It's that's the power of he and I, we get 10 minutes and we express what we think, and people quote our opinions, and then everyone moves on. And, and those are the stories that we need to understand these sacrifices and these moments in history to continue to keep people humble, respectful of the journey, of the good and the bad. Like right now, all we do is we attack each other by telling us what we're against, telling each other what we're against. What happened to the days of telling each other what we're for so we can learn how to understand each other and grow from one another? But by the way, I feel like it's 1991, 1992. And I happened to come see Coach Hamilton at his office, and he just preached to me for 20 minutes. He's got me feeling young again. By the way, is he not the best looking 52-year-old that you guys have seen? I mean, Jesus Christ, he keeps himself in incredible shape.
Go to Joseph from WIS TV.
Good morning, coaches. Hope you're both doing well. You talk about being action oriented. Just to bring out a report, if you look at African Americans, when they go to sell their houses, they typically get lower values when they get assessed than their white counterparts. So that's just one action. If you look at racism, how it's rooted in different ways, it's not as obvious. That would be one. I'm curious, when you talk to your players about being action oriented, certainly you can point to us in the media needing to do things differently, perhaps to garner attention of powers that be. How do you teach your players to handle racism that maybe isn't as overt? Maybe it's hidden as something as selling a house, something that maybe isn't as obvious to the common person. How do you deal with that with your players while also trying to teach a game at the same time?
Well, I don't want to dominate this conversation now. I try to teach our guys about general things that exist in our society. And I try to let them know, let's avoid, if at all possible, putting yourself in the category of just having symbolic gestures. I'm not one for symbolic gestures. I want to be part of the real solution. And even though there are activists and people who I feel have a approach that's worthwhile, that's helpful, but you also have people who make they express their personal feelings without any, as a result of their individual experiences and what they've been taught and what they believe, what they've been trained or taught to believe. And my approach has always been, we go behind closed doors and we're realistic about life. And I try to prepare my players for how to deal with circumstances as they come up. Not overreact, but have an open mind and evaluate and not have knee-jerk reactions and responses to things. So that's basically how I try to mentor the guys that are with me, as opposed to talk how mentally, emotionally they need to be prepared for a lot of different things.
Yeah, Joe, I was on a group call last night with a group of guys that I grew up with, and Coach Ham knows half of them. And we were talking because, Coach Ham kind of became one of us. I shouldn't say one of us. We were all kind of in it together down there in Miami. And because people have no idea, by the way, which is a different story, what South Florida basketball was like when Leonard Hamilton showed up in South Florida. And but we were on that call, and because they're all flying in this weekend for our game, and they were reminding me, because you got to understand, man, that the 60s was a long time ago. And he said, one guy on the call said, Frank, you don't remember back in the day when we were all kids? I said, what? He said, our parents were looking for a place to rent, and there'd be signs that say, no blacks, no Cubans, no dogs, no cats. That's a sign on the building. And I was too young to really understand that. But to Leonard's point, my family never felt like we hate everybody because that happened. On the contrary, they taught me we have a responsibility. This country's given us a chance. We have a responsibility to do right, to open up doors. And I've always been of the opinion that, back in the day, man, some people were allowed to run the race. Other people were never let in the race. What we got now is some people run the 100-meter race. Some people run the 110-meter hurdles. And now that same kid whose family could not rent a one-bedroom apartment in certain buildings, now he lives in a gated community in a house that's bigger than that whole apartment building. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because that's how I approach our players. It's the fact that there are challenges, the fact that we can't live with hate in our heart, or else we get swallowed up too. We have to figure out a way to embrace the challenges. And then our responsibility in our life is, like Leonard just made a powerful point. We spend too much time worrying about the president of the United States. We need to pay more attention to our own communities. It's hard to lead in Washington when you live in Columbia, South Carolina. We all have to impact our communities, our backyards in a better way. We got to do a better job of these things. And but that's try to talk to our players all the time about the humble journey that, and even if you find success, how hard it is to be successful. And success is viewed in different people's eyes in different ways. And we can't just relate money to success. There's a whole lot of unsuccessful rich people. It's one of those things, man. It's you got to talk to the players all the time about it. I'm sure Ham will tell you the same thing. The challenges are getting harder and harder because of social media. Social media just, it's a great fact-finding mechanism, but it's also a great confusion mechanism because so much hate and misinformation is spread on social media. And so you're constantly trying to educate the players to stay in the right place, because if they can go through the journey, hopefully they can do what Leonard Hamilton has done. You know what Leonard Hamilton's done in his life? As he ran that hurdle, he's taken the hurdles out of the way. So now people that he's touched in his life, they're able to run a cleaner race. They don't have to be jumping over, around, and through things. And it's what I've tried to do, the same thing. And if we can all impact the people that we're immediately around in the same way, and continue to open doors, then our players will understand and grow and become successful men, and be helpful and loving and caring, and be married and be successful husbands, successful fathers, and then society becomes a little bit wholer and a little bit saner again.
But Alex Zetlow.
Hi, coaches. Again, thanks for taking the time. Leonard, specifically as someone from Gastonia, North Carolina, somewhere pretty close to Rock Hill, when did you learn about the Friendship Nine, and did they inspire you?
That's a great question. And I'm always trying to choose my words properly so no one will take what I say out of context. But you just opened up a sore spot with me. I'm in North Carolina. I live there. I think I left Gastonia, let's say I was 20, 21. I never knew anything about the Wilmington Massacre. I coached in the state of Florida. 10 years at Miami. I'm going on 20 years here at the university, at Florida State University. I just found out about the riot and the attack in what's the little small town here, Chuck, where they had the massacre here. I know some of you guys in Florida, they come back with me in the mid part of the state, where they had the devastation similar to what happened in Wilmington. I'm in Oklahoma for 4 years at Oklahoma State. I didn't know anything about in the educational systems, and I never knew about the Black Wall Street massacre until the George Floyd incident comes. I'm in Gastonia, North Carolina. I didn't know anything about the Orangeburg massacre. I wasn't familiar with what happened at the Friendship Nine. So why is that? I mean, so I went to school, I read the books, but I never knew about the Friendship Nine until after I decided to come to this tournament. So you're gonna ask me to voice my opinion as I've done my research. It's similar to the same thing that happened in Orangeburg and so forth and so on, but that's not part of the history that people think that are important. But that's the same way we treat diet-related illness, mental illness, the education that keeps you from us having 50% of all marriages in divorce. And I go on and on and on and on. For whatever reason, instead of those incidents being part that we can educate ourselves from and try to avoid them and not let them happen again, it's almost like we don't want anybody to know that it happened, because somewhere along the line, I don't know why those things have been so suppressed and not given the same level of attention. But I can't say, I don't want to put that in the category of racism specifically, because we're doing the same thing with mental illness. We're doing the same thing with ability to understand how to address 50% of all marriages and divorce, the obesity that we have in school system, the diet-related illnesses that we have, the ability to, I can go on and on and on and on. And where is this think tank? We talk about climate change. We have conferences about oil, gas, wind, electricity, church conferences, math conferences. We don't have any conferences about these things that we're talking about in life. We're talking about specifically the Friendship 9 and the racism, but where is the initiative of how we deal with real life issues that are giving us the challenges? For instance, I think we in the Vietnam War, I think we lost, I don't know what the correct number is, I'm gonna give you, but I think it was close to 9 or 10,000 people, young men a year. We'll have almost 7 or 8,000, I'm close, alcohol-related fatalities with people between the ages of 16 and 25 this year. If we add in the drug overdoses, we add in the gun violence, we might have, and I'm not going to talk about the 9,000 people a day that are dying from COVID. I'm not going to include that. Diabetes, high blood pressure. So we have a war that we spend trillions of dollars on in Vietnam, but we have as many people dying in America from alcohol-related car fatalities, gun violence. So where's the war? Is the war in Vietnam? Is the war in Iraq? Or is the war right here in our society? So how do we spend trillions of dollars on a war thousands of miles away from us, and we having more people dying of drug overdose, diet-related illnesses, alcohol-related fatalities, domestic violence? So where's the war? The war is right here on our streets and our society. So what are we doing about that? So my point to you, when you ask me about my how I feel about, when did I find out about the Friendship 9? We treated the Friendship 9 like we do a lot of other things in our society. We vote on people and we send them to Washington on things, and then I mean, where can this be solved? You can specifically ask me about that, but you part of the problem. If you can't address it and you got to wait till I have a negative or positive comment on why it's been suppressed, and you don't have the initiative to want to say, how can this be? If you guys can't do that with the pen and the pencil and the microphone, if y'all got to wait on me and Frank to stir the thing, then y'all part of the problem as much as is a whole lot of other people. Because people like you are the ones that got to come together and raise the issues. So why did I not know? Explain to me why you think I didn't know anything about what happened in Wilmington, the massacre. I'm asking you, what's your thought of how I didn't know, why I didn't know? I was in school for 12 years. Well, actually 14. Can you answer that, Alex?
I can't. I mean, full disclosure, when I came to Rock Hill, that was also the first time I learned of the Friendship 9. So,
but why not? And I'm sure there are other issues in other states similar. So if you're going to ask me that, which I respect and appreciate, then what are you going to do? As a journalist? I mean, are you just going to ask me and let me comment on it? And then you just move on to the next one. But my point to you, that's what's going on in our society. You guys, much more than me and Frank, because if Frank and I get out of line and say too much about how we feel, we're gonna have we got to answer to somebody too. And so that's why I'm walking that line. I want to raise the consciousness. I want to encourage the dialogue. I want to encourage a organized, total, thorough plan, because I realize that my personal feelings about Pacific issues will be a direct result of the experiences that I grew up in. And so will yours. So am I going to be angry with you because what you heard from your peers form your negative impression of who I am and what I'm about? Am I going to be angry with you because you just a product of your environment? Are you going to be angry with me because I respond as a result of the experiences that I had growing up? So now, or am I going to give you a chance to get to know me and find out that I'm not really that bad a guy? And am I going to give you a chance to get to know you and find out that all of a sudden now what you heard about me, what you were taught to think about me is not really the truth, because maybe I ain't so bad. So then you and I become friends. So we share thoughts, we share communication, and we find out we got a lot more in common than we have, and we don't. But who's going to, how do we initiate that? Do I have to call you a name, you call me a name, and then we end up being upset with each other and we don't even know each other? Now, to me, that is very interesting. I'm gonna dislike you and I don't even know you. Ain't that something? Now, if I was in the hood and we was in a coaching meeting, I might say, ain't that a, but I can't say that.
Are there any more questions from the attending media?
Hey, you wait a minute, Chuck, you can't be breaking this up. We just getting started. If you got somewhere to go, we'll handle this one with Frank.
Hey, we're in finals week just like you guys, so we got a little time on our side here today.
Real quick, I did want to say Michael added a bunch of really great info in the chat, the credential request form and some really good info about the Friendship 9. So be sure to check that out. And he also mentioned there's a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Friendship 9 exhibit on Saturday. Media will be invited to that. So I'm sure Chuck and I will get some info and get that out to you guys in the next couple of days. Michael, is there anything else you would add?
No, just thank you, Emily. Thank you, Chuck, for putting this together. And then certainly Coach Hamilton, Coach Martin, for taking the time this morning. We look forward to having you and everyone else in Rock Hill this weekend. It should set up for a tremendous event. And if anything, this morning's session certainly reflects that this event is bigger than basketball. And that's what we've been saying since the event was developed. And this is just the backdrop that we are playing a game. So thank you all for committing to participate and being here this weekend.